This is the last formal lecture covering data, and this would be data as I've collected about over the past week and a half. So it's not perfect by any means, but it kind of gives you, what I've been hoping with these past four lectures. Again, it's not necessarily contemporary economic issues as we originally intended, but it does, I hope, give you a little bit of insight into what I, as an economist, what am I looking at and how am I trying to understand, the complexity that surrounds us. Okay. So let's start. Let's just start this as a formal presentation. So one of the big things that economists have been thinking about is this Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, because it's actually the first time the federal government has tried to reduce unemployment by virtue of the fact that loans could be made to pay for payroll, and that those loans would be forgiven so long as employers kept those employees on their payroll for, I think, until June. Now, the pool of money that was there for this Paycheck Protection Program, the pool of money was actually rather small relative to the need. And so what this map kind of gives you an idea of is how many loans per 1,000 businesses were made. To get the loan, you had to have fewer than 500 workers, so that's not the qualifying condition here. But what would be is per 1,000 small businesses in those states, how many applied for this loan? And as you can see, in Nebraska, about 1 in 3 small businesses applied for the loan. North Dakota, also very large amount. On the East Coast, like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, you see rather small amounts being captured. Us here in Hawaii, a relatively strong amount of small businesses, which gives you a sense of how dependent they are on small businesses, but also how many problems those small businesses are having. Now, when we look at how large these loans are for this program, about half of the loans were for $1 million or more. Now, again, these loans will be forgiven so long as the business keeps the same number of employees. So these are rather large loans that are drawing from the program in terms of the amount of the dollars. So about half of the dollars went to large pools for individuals. And then if we look at those loans that were, when they were approved for 350,000, when we look at the loans that were 350,000 or less, that was the majority of the loans that were approved. On the contrast, most of the $1 million loans were not. There were not very many of those approved. But again, when they were approved, the dollar amount was quite large. So obviously that was why we saw that. So it is helping very small loan amounts to help a business go through. Most of those loans were going through. It's just that they weren't very large in size. And of that $248 billion out there, what kind of business is it going to? Construction would be the biggest one, right? With your trades, especially on the mainland where you're talking about spring and summer construction periods coming up. Construction would be pretty big. Manufacturing, accommodation, food service, that would obviously be pretty big here in Hawaii. Retail. This is your snapshot, basically. This would be total number of loans approved. And obviously the construction loans, and we're saying, are not that large. Now, these small businesses are quite pessimistic about the future. The confidence level among these firms is quite low. So they're taking a big risk because if they don't have the same number of employees in June, they will have to pay the money back. So it's almost like you're not, even though the loan is forgiven if you have these employees, if you actually didn't think you were going to go back in business, there's no incentive to take out this loan because now you're going to be responsible for that as well. So it's not free money. Now, starting to look at other parts of the economy, the Philadelphia manufacturing index down. So quite a big decrease in manufacturing in Pennsylvania. New orders down significantly. So again, you're starting to see this contraction in the production of capital goods, classic signs of a recession or at least an economic downturn. How many employees buy these manufacturing firms? The fall off as great as it was in the 2008-2009 crisis. Work week down more because you can't even bring your employees into work. So no one's working in manufacturing. Now, I want to show this here because obviously I know I comment quite a bit on what the U.S. markets and to some degree even what the Asian markets look like. But if we actually look at this from Asia, we can actually get a good sense of how these markets are performing in year to date versus month to date. That the Vietnamese index this month has actually been a quite good month for markets. That month to date, so April, as of April 17th, the Vietnamese index is up nearly 16%, but year to date it's still down 20%. The Philippines index down nearly 30% for the year, up almost 6% for the month. So it gives you a sense of just how erratic, how chaotic, how volatile this month of April and of March have been, not only in the United States, but also in Asia. The coronavirus was so significant that it actually caused a contraction in GDP in China, something that has never happened before. Well, at least since they've been measuring it. So that would be 1992. It has never happened, and it has now happened for the first time. Retail sales year to date down in China. Not too surprising, but again, gives you an idea this is a worldwide slowdown. Unlike the 2008-2009 crisis where it wasn't worldwide. China actually still was okay. I mean, if we just look at the previous graph here, the 2008-2009 crisis, the economy still grew. It just grew by less. Now, if we start to look at like little things, like how could we see the unemployment, the large level of unemployment that most likely exists? How could we see that? How could we see that on a micro basis? Well, I mean, I don't use the site, but if we look at something like Indeed.com, we would see that in 2020, which is the yellow line, a huge drop off in the number of jobs posted. No one's hiring. I mean, why would you hire, right? Why would you make a new posting when you can't possibly have them working unless it was work from home? It's pretty much, across all the sectors of the economy, this decrease in job openings. Now, I put this up here because now as we start to think about the things that are really affecting Hawaii in terms of share of GDP versus share of employment, I mean, these are three important sectors in the Hawaiian economy. And this is nationally, but we can also put that think of that on a state-by-state basis. Um, Both of these constitute the majority of the Hawaii GDP. The employment numbers are greater, which is why we now today have the highest unemployment rate in the entire United States, or 37% by last count. Um, on a national basis, there's a variety of estimates out there. One estimate here, this is by J.P. Morgan, is that the unemployment rate will be 20%. It's a little high. I'm not sure it would reach that high, but that's one number out there. So the March unemployment numbers really will not come out until, let's see. You'll get to about March 15th next Friday, the 1st, May the 1st. We'll know what the data looked like up to about March 17th. So it's not that late of data. That would be historic, as this is from Nomura, which is a Japanese bank. Nomura also is estimating close to 20%. That, and then a pretty dramatic decrease, I'm presuming, once the economy opens up again. But still, it would rank as high as the Great Depression in terms of unemployment numbers. Now, let's start to look at how the structure of the economy and sectors that I'm starting to worry about would be. First, let's start with auto loans, right? That a large number of Americans have them, and those that do have them typically have very low credit scores. Now, this is looking at what are the rates that they're paying in February 2020. Those with the lowest credit scores are paying a rate that exceeds 16%. Okay, that's not too surprising, right? Greater risk by having a lower credit score, higher interest rate. That's not the concerning point. Sorry, I thought I had one. I do here, and then I'll skip back. Most of the people that owe the money are in the age 40 to 60 group. That group's actually growing quite quickly. Faster than the other two age groups. Presumably under 40, maybe you haven't bought the house yet. Maybe your kids aren't in college yet. Over 60, you're pretty much all financially set. You're not going to be really going anything. 40 to 60, I mean, here you're taking on the debt to buy the house. You're taking on the debt to send your kid to school. You're taking on the debt. You're taking on the debt. And what that means is that if they're also losing their job, then their probability of not being able to make their minimum debt payments is going up. Those under 40 just don't have a lot of money to start off with. Okay, let's go back here. Sorry, this slide should have been a little earlier. The highest estimate I've seen, and I just wanted to put this out here. The highest estimate I've seen is from the St. Louis Fed. An economist at the St. Louis Fed put the estimates out there that the unemployment rate could be greater than 30%. That I would be surprised. It's not impossible, but I would be surprised. That would then make it the highest historically measured amount ever seen. Now, what have people done? Right, if we compare February to March, the number of people who in February who didn't do anything at all was pretty high. I mean, I can think of friends of mine and others who did nothing at all. In February, they weren't taking their kids out of school or anything like that in February, but practically everyone did something in March. What did they do? Avoid public places, canceled their travel plans, large purchases, changed investments is actually the smallest. But these three things here obviously lead to the economy slowing down. So what are people spending money on? Well, we saw this increase very briefly in early March when we all started buying lots of groceries. And then we're basically eating all those groceries, using all that toilet paper. So you see this kind of decline here. You see the same increase here. Spent lots of money spent on groceries, and now it's down quite low because we're basically eating all that we bought before. Now, if we look at how much is being borrowed, it's reaching historic high levels, which means the reason why people are borrowing such high amounts right now is because people have no money coming in, so they're putting money on their credit card. They're borrowing as much as they can to tide them over until the unemployment check comes in or until their employment is resumed. And that's if they're eligible for unemployment, right? Because you could be a contract worker, like working for Uber, or get your money from like Airbnb, and you're going to have to borrow for all of your living expenses. Now, who's it hurting? Well, the vast majority, just like in any crisis, would be the poor. Those who make less than 50,000 as a family are being significantly, very significantly affected by the pandemic. All groups are being affected to some extent. Whether it be reduced hours or not having employment at all. Now, one of the big things would be when do we think, when do we think things will resume? So one of the places we could look would be, what do venture capitalists versus founders of a firm, what do they think in terms of when the recovery is? Looks like a year. I mean, that's basically the best way to put it. It's what I've been telling my wife, that it'll probably be 1 year before you start to see that recovery. So whenever I hear someone say something about the recovery happening in the summer, that everything's going to happen in the summer, that's just too optimistic, I think. It just can't happen. It's too quick. 2020 is basically a write-off year in terms of the economy. Everything should be done to build up for 2021, in my opinion. Now, as you all know, I am a state worker, so my concern from my personal aspect would be, what does the state finances look like? And if you look at this graph, dude, Hawaii ain't got a lot of money sitting around in a reserve fund. The states that really do have it the most, Wyoming, Alaska, North Dakota, dude, they're going to really need it because most of their money was actually coming from oil, and the oil markets have completely and totally collapsed. So they're going to need all of that reserve funding that they have. Wyoming's got nothing at all anyway, so I don't think their infrastructure costs are pretty small. Same with North Dakota. Doesn't have a lot going on as it is. But look at Illinois and Kansas. There is no leeway. There is no space. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, states hard hit by the virus. Not a lot of leeway. New York, very hard hit by the virus. Not a lot of leeway. All these states are going to, any of these states are going to have trouble. There was a proposal in Congress to basically give grants to each of the states. I think Hawaii was slated to get about $1.4 billion. It did not pass the Congress. Who knows? I don't generally like this kind of politics part of the process. But I guess I could say, right, that even in the case of Hawaii, state government employees and the University of Hawaii is the largest employer in the state, and state government's obviously very important. So somehow it's going to have to all be paid for one way or the other. Now, I put this in here because this is going to affect Hawaii quite significantly, and that would be number of jumbo loans. So jumbo loan would be the amount where it exceeds the amount that the FHA will cover for a mortgage. I think here in Hawaii it's about $700,000 or $800,000. That amount. The availability of these loans has fallen dramatically. Banks aren't lending that kind of money, and probably, quite honestly, people aren't buying those kinds of houses as it is. And surprisingly, the jumbo rates are now higher, which is unusual. Usually, the conventional rates are higher because they're resold by other agencies and everyone's taking their cut. Jumbo loans are usually held by the bank itself, and now we're seeing a weird thing where the jumbo rates are actually a little bit higher, basically providing some sense that the risks being taken on are of the person not paying their mortgage are a little bit higher, marginally higher. HH standing for head of household. So this would be head of household debt delinquency expectations. There are growing expectations that households will become delinquent on their debts over the next 3 months. So really, we're not seeing the true economic impact of all that's going on now, and we won't see that really until the summer. Now, as we're all getting our stimulus payments, I know I got mine about 2 weeks ago. What are we going to be using it to spend, to use with our money? What the government hoped that we would do is that we would spend it on bills. I don't know what I'm doing with mine. I didn't really honestly need it. I'm obviously not unemployed right now. I'm not on furlough or anything like that. My wife is working as well, so I don't really have a need for it. So I guess right now, I fit into the top category of saving it. Fortunately for the government, people are spending it though too. It's not good that they're spending down debt, but it would be good if they use it on expenses or purchasing things. Vacation, dude, where are you going? This isn't surprising. A lot of uncertainty in terms of economic policy. Dude, I don't even know what the policy is going to look like. So it's historically high. Not only that, but the markets are quite volatile. We're seeing as many hits to the circuit breaker, meaning that the stock market is falling by more than 7%. It's happening a lot. I don't know what else to say. Happened a lot in 2009, a few times in 2010 so far. Even on now lockdown or home, us all being bound to home, we've still had 4. I would expect this number will increase in the coming months. Now, going back to the discussion of the states, what kind of taxes do they use to get their income? So let's look first at Hawaii. In Hawaii, as most of us would know, property taxes are not very high. Most of the money that we have coming in is our general sales tax, the GST. That funds the majority of what we all do here. Corporate taxes and even property taxes are quite low. So we depend on sales. If there's not a lot of sales going on, then there's not much that can be done. As opposed to a state like New Jersey, where in New Jersey, make sure I'm following the right line here, where the money comes in is a bit different, right? You've got a big chunk coming in from personal income, another chunk coming in from corporate income. I'm sorry, and again for Hawaii, if the big chunk is coming in from personal income taxes, here's corporate income coming in from personal income taxes. If people become unemployed, that money disappears. So all of the revenue coming into the state is gone, as opposed to Wyoming, where in Wyoming Royalties from selling gas, that's a big chunk right here. You've got your sales tax here. Property taxes are quite low in Wyoming. So what I'm saying here is that the solution that each state needs to employ to get out of this crisis is going to be quite different depending on their situation. Why does Nevada why doesn't want the strip to open? Why does it want everyone gambling? Because over half of their budget comes from people spending money. I don't know if Nevada has a income tax. I think they do, but it must be quite low. Half their money's coming in from sales taxes. They need people to come visit. And their responses are all going to be different based on this. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, it says down here. So it's saying here that 9 states... There's 9 states that aren't taxing personal income. So Nevada must be one of those, or if anything, the level must be quite low. Now, we want people to save money, and we would expect that in a time like this, people would save a lot of money. But if people save a lot of money, what this situation looks like right here, what it does is it means people aren't going to spend as much, which then means that the GDP, the level of production, which this is tracking here, is going to be lower, such that by 2022, start of 2022, the economy will be $500 billion lower than it otherwise would have been. That we're looking at an economy that is basically not going to change very much over the next 2 years. I just included this because if you made it this far in this conversation, we should at least have something nice. Oh, look at that grilled cheese. That looks like a yummy, yummy sandwich. Even the roast beef looks pretty good. I don't like peanut butter and jelly. I've actually never had one, and the look of it now looks quite disgusting. That tuna salad looks pretty. Egg salad looks good too. And most of these sandwiches look good, except the peanut butter and jelly. Grilled cheese. Who doesn't like grilled cheese? I guess that's what this slide is saying. Okay. That wraps up the last full lecture for a data-specific lecture for this class. I suspect one of you is going to end up writing a reflection paper on sandwiches, which I guess would be fair game because it is in this slide. But I would try to look at the other 36 slides and do those and maybe make mention of which sandwich you like.